Powerful insights often occur when you least expect them. On Transformative Leadership Conversations, they're at the heart of every episode. Hi, I'm your host, Winnie Da Silva, and together we're exploring a spectrum of leadership themes through the compelling stories and insights of seasoned leaders and prominent experts. And in each episode, you'll walk away with inspiration, strategies, and tools to enhance your leadership, build effective teams, and lead thriving organizations. So this month, we've been exploring the relationship between stress and leadership. Not just the kind that keeps us up at night, but the kind that drives us, shapes us, and, if left unchecked, can take a real toll on our work, our relationships, and of course, on our health. So as leaders, we're ambitious. We want to make an impact, we want to grow, we want to achieve, but that same drive that fuels us can also drain us. It can even cause lasting harm if we don't learn how to work with stress rather than against it. That tension is at the heart of this leadership series, Excellence Without Exhaustion. So we began with Martin Redigolo, who shared his personal relationship with stress and how it's evolved throughout his leadership career. Then we heard from Jan-Philipp Martini, the founder and CEO of Sapiens, who talked about his own journey from thriving in a high-performance consulting career to facing a health crisis that reshaped how he defined success and inspired him to start Sapiens. And now in this episode, we're bringing the two of them together to connect these stories. So in this episode, I'm joined by both Martin and Jan-Philipp to take this conversation, of course, one step further. We're going to talk about what happened when Martin went through the Sapiens Stress and Resilience Diagnostic himself, what the data revealed, how it compared to what he thought he knew about his stress, and how those insights are changing the way he leads. During this conversation, you'll hear us refer to a few pages directly from a Sapiens example report, the same kind of report that Martin received when he went through the diagnostic. And for those of you who are listening on YouTube, you can actually see some of those pages as well. Together, we'll explore what it looks like when science meets self-awareness and how understanding our biology can deepen rather than limit our capacity to lead really well. And since today's conversation is all about Martin's experience going through the Sapiens diagnostic and what he discovered, it's the perfect time to share how you can experience all of this for yourself. So if you've been listening to this entire series and wondering what your own data might reveal about how stress shows up for you, this is your chance to find out. So for listeners of Transformative Leadership Conversations, Sapiens is offering 20% off their Stress and Resilience Diagnostic and Habit Change program. Just use the podcast code TLC when you sign up. The offer is valid through the end of 2025. So the way that it works, it's a 4-month journey that begins with an at-home diagnostic, including stress hormones, cortisol analysis, ECG monitoring, and recovery analytics, followed by 3 months of expert-guided habit coaching and monthly progress tracking. So if you're curious or just kind of on the fence as whether or not this is the right opportunity for you, you can book a free 15-minute consultation with someone from the Sapiens team. They'll walk you through what to expect and to help you figure out if it's the right thing for you. There's a direct link in the show notes and more information about Sapiens, which can make scheduling quick and easy, or you can visit www.b-sapiens.com for all the details. And you'll hear much more about Sapiens, how it started, how it works, and what leaders are learning from it in this next episode. By the way, Excellence Without Exhaustion is also the tagline of Sapiens, which I thought perfectly captures what this month's leadership series is all about. Okay, so let's get in my conversation with Martin and Jan-Philipp. So, Martin and Jan-Philipp, welcome back. The 4th episode of this series. This is really special because I've talked to each of you individually. Now we're kind of all talking together because it's going to bring everything that we talked about separately kind of full circle, right? So, Martin, you were able to share some of your story and your journey as an executive and your experiences around stress. Jan-Philipp, we talked about your personal story and also Sapiens. and so much really great information and data, and just really understanding how our body works and responds to stress and what we can be looking for. And so in this last episode, we're really going to get into kind of the so what and what's next, but through the story and through kind of the eyes of you, Martin, because, you kind of told the story prior to you knowing Jan Philip and now having joined Sapiens. So this is really full circle. Um, so maybe we can start with kind of how you guys met. I know you briefly talked about this in our episode, Martin, but maybe you can talk just a little bit about how you met, how you connected, and honestly, how you became, and you're now working with uh, Jan Philip. So maybe you can talk. We'll start there.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say it's internet randomness, well planned by the universe, because it just came at a moment where I had left BCG, as we were discussing before, and also as Jan Philip was sharing on the other episode. It's in a high stress, high performance, high velocity environment, and it's let's say a video from one of his workshops popped up on my LinkedIn feed. So it captured my attention. I was like, what's this? Because I can't remember what kind of words were around the video, but there was obviously some kind of intro that he had written, and a common contact, which is an MDP from BCG, had liked it, and that's why it popped up on my feed. Um, I checked out the video because I found the initial impact of the idea combining leadership coaching, with data and biometrics, just a super new concept. And I felt like that's something new, and I think there must be something good behind, because I would say everybody who's in a more senior role and has gone through a couple of internal learnings and trainings, and maybe they had even had the chance to get an individual coach over time, that's all fine. They add value. But that seemed to be like a totally different new perspective and could open, one's own mind and understanding way more. So
Whole nother level, right? Whole nother, a lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
more
yeah.
depth. Yeah, added.
So I watched the video, super interesting. I can just recommend it to anybody because it describes really well what Jan Philip has been doing in the past and how it came up then
We'll add
as,
the video to the show notes so people can find it. Yep.
um and I felt like this impulse of, let's just reach out to him, because I mean we did not know each other, but felt like, this you know saying hi, I like your content, kind of giving feedback also over digital channels to unknown people. um and that's how somehow we connected, because I felt like, hey, if this should happen anytime soon in around Madrid or in Spain, let me know. Maybe, we can, I don't know, do something together. And then, it came to a first call. We said hi in person, digitally, but, at least in person. Um, and yeah, and then it kind of kept on going, because I was also in a moment where I was not saying no to any other opportunities, work-wise. Let's say I was open, hey, maybe after my previous experience that I've described on the first episode, it's like, maybe I would go rather, back again into a really more consulting role. It was a team leadership people role that I had lastly. So I was considering different options, just like, what could happen. And I felt like, this is a meaningful idea and solution that resonates with me, also with the values that I've mentioned in the previous episode. Um, so let's say I felt like there was a connect, but it needed to be explored somehow, right? Because I mean, it's
And Martin, what's your role with Sapiens now?
yeah. So over the conversations, actually, I appreciate the trust also that Jan Philip had in myself, because he was the first one opening. Hey, why don't you join our partners WhatsApp group? I was like, okay, what's that? And so I joined. I was in the group, and I was on a call, a weekly partner call, but we hadn't yet signed anything. It was just pure interest, and let's say from my side, passion without knowing in a topic that resonated, with my own experience, but also what I feel like is very important and could be adding a lot of value to many more people. And then kind of it ended up obviously discussing, hey, is that something that you would be more and more interested in, maybe, supporting from local perspective, as I'm here in Spain and it's a geography and market that has not been explored yet. So I can just sort of support and bring all the content and then context and the context that I have from my side. To basically, bring this solution to more and more companies who have, high performing leadership teams and people, even if it's on a one-on-one level, that for sure will benefit from Jan-Philipp's idea and the solution that the team has built. And that's how we basically signed an agreement to collaborate. And now I'm partner in his team.
That's great. Jan-Philipp, you want to add to any of that? Add to any of that?
No, I felt Martin is living his own story very authentically, and that's a big part next to the medical and neuroscience expertise that we have in the team that we bring together. Essentially, Sapiens is about, for everybody who hasn't listened to the previous conversation, is about stress diagnostics company and human performance support. And we're a team of medical doctors, neuroscientists, experts in the field of stress and resilience. And we basically use body data in order to help you refine your daily routines. And we have kind of our teams consisting out of three types of people. The first one is the scientists and researchers. These are two professor scientific advisors, a neuroscientist, biotech colleague, and then we have the experts who are doing one-on-one support and the debriefs of our diagnostics, which are medical doctors, a nutritionist, a sleep scientist, a fitness expert, or an exercise expert, etc. And then we have what we call partners. And these are people that understand the intensity of the roles of people that we work with in depth because they have been in their shoes. And we like to, for example, combine the former McKinsey consultant together with a medical doctor and then create a team of supporting an individual from somebody who really understands the pressure and the intensity of their job so that they make recommendations which are really tactical and suitable for busy calendars. And at the same time, we are an expert-driven business, meaning we're bringing in medical doctors, sleep scientists who go really, really deep into the topic and can adjust the advices that we give to people's reality and make them really medically sound.
That's awesome. Yeah, because you really are offering this holistic body data and solutions and well, a diagnostic, a debrief, and then solutions, right? To understand and really customize to the person. And like we talked about in the other episode, what I love about the team that you're describing that you have on Sapiens is that depending on kind of what you're most challenged with or where your stress shows up the most or where you have the most problems, you can be you would be assigned to someone in that area of expertise to help you think about through your data and think through what your solutions and daily habits how they should change. Did I get that right? Ok okay, good, good. So in this episode, what we're gonna do, is we're going to kind of unpack Martin, your what you learned when you went through it yourself, right? Just as you've described, that's what the partners are there for, right? Is to kind of be a representative of understanding how your other clients and high stress, high performing organizations, what they have, done and lived through. So Martin, so you met Jan-Philipp, and then you ended up actually taking the diagnostic. Can you 'cause so let's take this into 3 different buckets. So one is what was it like to do the diagnostic, right? 2, what kind of diagnostic or what kind of debrief did you get, right? So after you did the diagnostic, who did you talk to? What did you learn? Again, keeping it high level. And then third, what kind of next steps did you take? By the way, so did Jan-Philipp do the debrief with you, or did you do it with somebody else?
I was happy to talk to the CEO coach, Jan-Philipp.
Okay, cool. Okay, good. Awesome. Okay, so let's start with the diagnostic. So again, we have to keep it high level. You got this kit that, I mean, Jan-Philipp, I know you showed it in your episode. Can you show it again? It's really like this nice black box with 3 different compartments, 1, 2, 3. And so you get that at home. So briefly as you can, describe what you did and how that worked, and was it comfortable? Was it easy? Was it disruptive? Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I received it. I mean, Jan-Philipp was also generous to sort of give me the option to test it as I was onboarding as a partner in the company. So I think it's important to understand the product and the service really well. I took it, and on a high level, I was lucky, but also, let's say, in my role of a designer, analyzing the really amazing experience that had already been designed, as he was mentioning on the previous episode, to take away all of this noise of when you get something and you don't understand, you have to walk through it. It's like really well guided to make it as simple as possible so that you can really execute it in a working week when you're busy and maybe the kids and everything, with ease.
I mean, Martin, I'm so glad you said this because, of course, I didn't even, you're the designer, you're like into, user experience. That's the first thing you mention. And I didn't even think about that, but that's really important. I mean, it's important, I think, to everybody because, we all want it to be something that feels like it's easy and it's not disruptive and it's probably nice to look at. Anyway, so thank you for mentioning that. That's really
Yeah,
important.
yeah, yeah. So I got it, and I was slightly pre-informed, but still, I was in the shoe of a user. So I did that. And over the week, obviously, I had to, wear the diagnostic, the ECG monitor, which is the number 2 on screen
And for those
here.
of you who are on YouTube, we're looking at kind of the diagnostic, how it breaks down. So go
So
ahead.
in that box with the 3 smaller boxes in the kit, let's say, you will find all of this, and it's really well designed and guided through, instruction cards and numbers, and you always have also like a WhatsApp channel you can reach out to a support person. So you definitely feel not lost. And while it's easy, it gives you the confidence you will do it right. Don't miss anything. There's a weekly planner, so it's complex in itself, but made easy for the one who has to do it on their own, because you have to take the saliva in the morning. You wake up. You should not forget it, because otherwise, obviously, it might affect the precision of the results. Um, so I took that, and that was already a really, really nice experience. Um, and then obviously, you send the individual, probes back, so that it can be analyzed in the lab. And yeah, as Jan-Philipp mentioned, like 2 weeks after, you get the report, so you can have a look at the report yourself. But then I was lucky enough to have that one-on-one coaching with Jan-Philipp.
So, okay, so you did the diagnostic. I love this picture that we're seeing right now because you've got like box 1 has got like some of the tubes that you need to use. Box 2. Well, actually, Jan Philip, why don't you explain it? Can you kind of describe how you would describe what's on the screen?
The 4 basic tests that everybody gets is number 1, a saliva cortisol profile. We measure 2 to 3 days. And that essentially tells you how well you upregulate your energy in the morning and how well you downregulate your energy after work. And then secondly, you wear an ECG monitor for 5 days. An ECG monitor measures the electrical signal of your heart. It's like a really accurate wearable device. And that gives you an insight about when during the day are you stressed versus when are you able to recover. And that also gives you a in-depth recovery sleep analysis. And then the third thing you get is a little hair sample, and you just provide 2 strands of hair, and that gives you a 3 months history book of the major stress hormone and resilience factors. And then the fourth thing is you are doing a self-assessment, and that gives us all the health symptoms, immune system, gut health symptoms, mental health symptoms, as well as a really accurate view of your habits. What are you eating in the morning, at lunch, at dinner? What are your thought patterns? What are potentially stress amplifying or stress de-amplifying thought patterns? And then if that's not enough for you and you really want to go into details in one of the body's systems, you can do a blood test, a microbiome test, or a glucose monitor, or measure your blood pressure continuously.
Wait, so those are all options, those other follow-up pieces?
Exactly. Either you do them straight away if you have an hypothesis that that might be a topic of interest. If you, for example, have lots of sugar cravings, it might be interesting to look into measuring glucose for 2 weeks. But that can also be a follow-up in case we have an hypothesis based on the first 4 tests that you did, and you want to confirm or disconfirm that hypothesis.
Got it. Okay, got it. Okay, that's super helpful. Okay, so Martin, you went through all of this, and then you got the results sent to you, and you had a chance to look at them yourself before you met with Jan-Philipp. Is that right?
Yeah. So obviously it's very eye-opening to, some data points you might recognize from other analytics that you have been doing in the past with some other doctors or in different moments of your life. So you might recognize some things. I felt very eye-opening the idea of, with the ECG monitor that you wear 24 hours a day through the full working week, you can match your heart rate against basically your work week calendar.
Ah, by the way, I'm just gonna say that for those of you who are on YouTube, you can actually see what Martin is describing, that report, and how it yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, imagine like obviously the heart monitor shows where's your heartbeat going up and down and where your resting periods and where you maybe, this stressful moments of your day. But I would say what caught my attention when I first saw that video on LinkedIn from Sapiens was the link between how does your body, maybe that nervous system that Jan-Philipp described before, react invisibly, and sometimes you without knowing, but you feeling, but you never would cross it visually against what the hell happened in that very moment when I was in the office. And maybe then you realize, oh, that was actually when I had this difficult meeting or conversation, or why was I so nervous when I actually was having my lunch break? Or it's all of these kind of overlaps that suddenly can
Can I
happen.
jump in here for a second? Because I think what you're saying, which is so powerful about this diagnostic and the reporting afterwards, is that like what you described, it's like things happen and they're invisible, right? But actually, this makes it visible what's actually happening to your body in the middle of, oh yeah, I look back, oh yeah, I remember I did actually have that difficult conversation. That's what's happening right there on Monday. Monday morning, that's where that red spike came in, right?
Yeah, but that was actually, yeah, that was also very eye-opening, and Jan-Philipp pointed me to it because we looked at my cortisol profile in the morning, and also like, why was my stress level usually no, not usually Monday, no, every morning quite high, quite red, what people were seeing on YouTube. Like, why am I the first hour of the day rather in a stressed situation based on the heart rate data? And then he pointed me to, look, first, it's good that your cortisol was up because you get going. That was he describing, right? It pushes you, it gives you energy and activates your body and system. In my case, it overlaps with waking the kids up, getting ready for school. So it's a stressful situation, I guess, for many parents. And then obviously along the day, it went further down. And again, I would say a totally different perspective on crossing this information. In my case, was understanding, and I never understood why, but most people, I assume, can relate. Sometimes you sleep long, but you wake up tired, and you don't know why. And I realized through the data that I obtained that basically, if your heart rate, the heart rate variability that is being measured, is in a specific range that basically shows that you're stressed, you might be sleeping, but your body is not relaxed. So you can sleep, and it just happened like a couple of weeks back. I slept like 10 hours, 12 hours almost through, but I woke up and I was tired. And I know now that it's because I can relate my current situation, or maybe a moment at work, or things that happen around me with that. And now I can, I mean, we will deep dive later a little bit more, but into the tactics that I can apply in order to, as Jan-Philipp was also describing, you detect the signals and you know now what to do. But this report and these kind of ideas that data can show you with an eye of an expert and the knowledge of an expert basically give you the meaning to what you're going through.
So for those of you on YouTube, you can actually see this part of the report that talks about nervous system and sleep. And just so you know, for those of you who are looking at this report, it's not Martin's report because we didn't want to share Martin's report, the details, but it does show a sample report, and it's so interesting to again look at the data, look at how it falls into all these different categories. So it breaks it down into other pieces. Night recovery, sleep quality, sleep time regularity. I just think your comments about, sleeping versus being relaxed. I mean, it's like you kind of assume that if you're asleep, you're relaxed. And it sounds like that's not true, which I think maybe we all instinctively know that it isn't, which is incredible. Um, so Martin, this was great. I mean, Jan Philip, maybe we can get your voice in here for a minute and would love to hear you talk about how you how you typically with Martin or otherwise walk through a report with somebody.
Yeah, the report is really answering three questions. The first one is, what's the state of my body considering the amount of chronic stress I had in my life? We call that the body reserve, and it's based on 30 years of academic work and a few hundred publications around the topic of academic allostatic load. And we essentially took the models that are out there in the literature called allostatic load index and translated them into the body reserve score that you're getting. And essentially 100 out of 100 means you are very resilient, you're incredibly well adapting to stress, and a 0 out of 100 means you're poorly adapting or most of your body systems are depleted. So step one is kind of what's the state of my body. Step two is what's protecting my body and what's driving stress. And then step three is what's next. What are the most likely interventions based on your neurobiological profile of stress that are driving the biggest impact for reducing stress?
So right there in the report, you are already based on the data making some recommendations on what that person could do differently.
At least on a high level. And this is the executive summary that people see on YouTube. And we can go deeply into the data of each of the body systems. So in the example of a client that we have here, he is in between a yellow or orange state. So it's not optimal. His body is clearly coping with his stress, and the hormonal system is already showing some signs of dysregulation. Basically, what we see here is a lowered overall cortisol level. That's early signs of fatigue. Together with a suboptimal sleep quality. So somebody here doesn't shut off fully at night. And oftentimes that's a signal that's coming that the immune system is active at night. Inflammation is going on. And that inflammation we then also measured in a blood test that we had for this example, where the value, which is called HCRP, it's a systemic inflammation marker, was activated while joint pain was also there, which is oftentimes a sign of arthritis or inflammation. And all of these data together then inform that, okay, there's a depleted cortisol level. Cortisol usually suppresses inflammation. That was no longer possible here. That's a reason why you get sick when you just start your holiday after intense work weeks, right? It's because cortisol is no longer there to suppress inflammation, and suddenly all of it comes out. And that's exactly happened here for this person, just over months and years. And then the interventions are essentially based on these data, your current habits, which we can talk about later.
Okay, got it. Okay, very good. So you got this report, something similar for you, Martin. And you kind of, talked a little bit about some of the insights that you had. Can you describe like maybe one particular sort of just from the data itself, one one particular thing that stood out that you're like that you didn't know or that really was eye-opening for you? Was there one thing that stood out?
I mean, one thing that Jan-Philipp described when we were having this conversation, and I think it's something that is being looked for anybody who's doing it some kind of, do you have a superpower maybe that you're not aware of, how you can handle specific situations that are stressful, right? In my case, it came out through the heart rate crossed again by my daily activity, that actually high load of focused work was not stress showing up as stress, but rather a period where my body slowed down and recovered. Right. So that's something that is like, okay, I mean, how would any other person in the world be able to show you something like this or bring it to surface so that you can perceive it and actually learn something that you would never be aware of yourself. So that was one thing.
It's almost like it sounds like it's the flow state that you're in, right? Right? And you're enjoying your work, you're doing it, you're really, like, into it, and your body and your mind and your brain are all sort of, like, in
So
sync.
I felt that was really something that keeps me thinking like, okay, if I'm doing work now, for example, do I perceive myself really relaxed? Or obviously it can be intense, but an intensity is different to your, maybe it's an intensity more on a mental level, but again, the rest of your body knows that there's no danger, there's no risk. We can stay calm. Nothing, from the nervous system needs to be pushed into your body to run away or fight. Uh, there's no boss, though, you're ever coming into the room. Um, but yeah, that was really good. And I think if I go a little bit outside Sapiens for a second, and it was before I got to know Jan-Philipp, and that was actually the story I shared with him when we got to know each other. I was training for my first half marathon. And there was a time when I was going through, let's say, a difficult situation for myself at work. Um, and I had, if anybody's doing training, or routine training and doing series and stuff, and yeah, it's like, I mean, it's constant training, and you're working maybe with heart rate zones to achieve a specific improvement in your performance. So as you train in a specific heart rate zone, I realized that when a thought crossed my mind, even though I was running at the same speed, heart rate went up. And but I was understanding it, or I was, yeah, reading it as, okay, I I notice it on my watch, but okay, it's not the most precise device maybe, but enough to give me an idea. Then, as I did the diagnostics myself, which is way more precise, and then we crossed it with the data throughout the week. We discussed it, and it's actually what happens in a working environment as well. Suddenly you have this thought, suddenly you have this situation popping up, and your body goes up and down, and maybe it's in the past, as I was describing in my first episode. Maybe in the past it was more like, I just had a bad moment. Now I realize and I can relate, and I interpret myself, knowing that there's data behind and science that can describe exactly what is happening. And this allows me obviously now to totally address situations differently, and maybe work my own way out of them. eh, you know, with that new knowledge that I obtained.
Yeah. So let's get into that. W Jan-Philipp, you met with, Martin and kinda walk through this data. How did that go? Maybe you can, um well, you walked through the data, but then there was kind of the next steps, like the "so what?" What do we do now? So what was that "so what do you do now?" What were the highlights there? I mean, Martin, maybe you can describe it, and then, Jan-Philipp, you can talk a little bit more about that. And again, for those that are you on YouTube, we're gonna get to see, a little bit of that, uh, that part of it, that part of the report. So Martin, what was recommended to you?
The good thing, I would say, is that there were a series of recommendations slash tactics slash new habits that I could work on. Some of them were known to me, but the report and, let's say, the conversation made it clearer why and how should I apply some of them in my day, right?
Yeah, the how and the why, right. So what's an example? Like, give us an example.
For example, I did in the past some kind of evening, let's say, yoga stretching, and I realized, hey, it's actually not too bad. I felt some kind of improvement, but it was disconnected from that data layer that gives you way more understanding of why is this good, or the science behind, right? Or everything that is related to the morning. I heard in other, let's say, trainings and coachings, maybe, drink a cup of water or a glass of water right in the morning, but knowing what's behind of drinking water. And there was a nice metaphor that Jan-Philipp brought up, which was your brain sits in a dark chamber every day, every time, every moment. Your brain has never seen daylight, but your body needs to give, or your body and your brain need to be connected to understand, is it now night and I have to sleep, so I have to regulate myself into sleep mode, or am I waking up and I have to get going, right? So there are tactics, and Jan-Philipp can add more details now, that were kind of known, but it was like, yeah, but why, and what's the story behind all of this? Why should I do it? Because some ideas, are being shared, but you're like, yeah, but okay, it's just drinking a glass of water.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, because there's lots of things that we know we should do or people recommend, but like, what's the why behind that, right? So Jan Philip, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about, some of those key recommendations that can come up for people?
Yeah, let's make an example. This is not exactly Martin, but this person, as I said, had struggles to fully downregulate at night. We had the hypothesis, some inflammation going on, as I mentioned. We also confirmed that with a blood test. We also noticed cortisol levels in hair, meaning the last 3 months of cortisol was down. And then also all the resilience markers, like all the hormones that indicate resilience or that are correlated with resilience, were also suppressed. And then lastly, the morning cortisol was blunted, meaning usually cortisol spikes in the 30 minutes after waking. But for this example client, it was actually going down. So overall, we had a situation of some level of fatigue, was also confirmed by a validated fatigue questionnaire that we asked the person. So this is kind of the feeling that many listeners can probably relate to, which is not really fully getting out of bed in the morning. There's aches and pains and a little bit joint pain everywhere. And I'm actually sleeping enough, but still I'm fatigued waking up. So in this example, right, given the set of data points we have here, an action plan usually has 3 steps. The first step was we want to realign your circadian rhythm. How do we do that?
And that
Martin
was for
mentioned
this particular person, right? These are yeah.
Yeah. So for somebody usually who has a blunted cortisol awakening response or feels like they're not really fully getting out of bed in the morning, the first thing we do is realigning the circadian cortisol rhythm. And that works in particular by getting bright light straight after waking. 10 minutes of outdoor light, 10 minutes after waking is setting the circadian clock in the right order because it trains or it spikes your cortisol in the morning. That's a really good thing. It then helps to set your circadian clock and get other hormones which are inducing sleep later in the day, cortisol down, melatonin up, for example. That together with a stable bedtime is usually the most important first step to restabilize that circadian clock.
And I assume you have to kind of go to bed at the same time every night too. Like that's part of that too.
Yeah, so if you just do 2 things, it's basically a 10-minute morning sunlight, or there's daylight lamps in case you're in a place where it's dark. Going to the same to bed at the same time, that can be painful socially, but sometimes in order to get through that period of fatigue or reset it, that might be the poison to be taken. So that's kind of step 1. We work a lot on circadian rhythm in order to reset that circadian clock. The second step then for this particular example, that might not be the case for everybody, of course, but given that there was increased inflammation in the body, we then took out the inflammatory potential of the food, right? So essentially we recommended a diet high in what's called monounsaturated and omega-3 fatty acids. That means in this case, for example, the person supplemented omega-3 fish oil, 2 grams per day, or algae oil for that sake also works. Increase the amount of monounsaturated fat. That's basically the fats that the cells need in order to have proper cell walls. And because energy is being produced inside of the cells in something that's called mitochondria, it's really useful to have cell walls which are fluid enough to get all the stuff inside of the cell that the mitochondria need. That's why we basically focus on proper fats in the diet. We also recommend to have lots of colorful vegetables and fruits, ideally a large variety of them throughout the week. That usually helps with reducing something that's called oxidative stress in the cells. And then we also recommend to reduce the sugar intake and carbohydrate intake and correlate it with movement. So the more you move, the more carbohydrates you eat. The less you move, the more sedentary you are, the less carbohydrates you eat. In some cases, that of course depends on the particular profile. But in a man, for example, who generally eats a lot of croissants, pastries for breakfast and then sits all day, we would recommend to start with a protein-based breakfast for this example. So this specific example basically starts with aligning circadian rhythm, then goes into nutrition. And a third step here is for that person was strength training of what's called the posterior chain, but that was very specific, given that the person had lots of issues with the lower back and hip. A traditional, and which is then driving stress, essentially, it's a way of expressing tension. Another traditional example is to start with little micro recovery techniques, like inducing a little bit of more recovery throughout the day, interrupting these periods of high activation. And that can be by a practice that's called 4-8 breathing, where you inhale for 4, exhale for 8, because whenever your exhales are longer than your inhales, that deactivates the nervous system. And we do that after every meeting for 1 minute. So these are just some examples of traditional practices to reverse this subtle fatigue. This is not clinical fatigue, but rather subtle signs of fatigue.
And so all these examples all these recommendations that you just provided is obviously very much customized to that person's profile and that person's data. So as you said, this isn't something that would be recommended for everybody. But what you're showing on the screen right now too is that those are the detailed recommendations behind each of those 3, right? And all the things that you could possibly do to counteract the things that, your body is struggling with or your body needs.
Spot on. Yeah, we believe in highly customized interventions. The question is coffee good or not good is not the question that we answer, but we answer the question based on your profile. If you happen to have high blood pressure, if you happen to have high cortisol levels and an overactivated nervous system, then coffee is probably not a very good idea, versus if all of these 3 are not the case, then coffee might be a healthy option, right? So essentially, we are answering it depends a lot, but we make it very specific for individual people. But for the listener who's listening to this and is wondering, what can I do with this? I think some of the important messages here are really, when there's some level of fatigue or restlessness, starting with your circadian rhythm is usually the first step. Get into a stable rhythm, right? Morning sunlight, evening dimmed light, some level of evening down regulation. Don't go to bed with your screen, but rather have this like 30-minute period where you dim the light in the house, where you shut off the device, and where you get your body into the posture that you haven't been in all day, like hanging on a bar somewhere to release body tension. Right, going into a yoga pose that's called downward dog. So basically, you want to get your body into a shape where you haven't been in all day, so that it has the option to release some body tension. Maybe you want to have a warm shower or bath, which also releases tension, right? And then having a stable bedtime period of like 8 hours recovery window. That's kind of always step 1 to stabilize and reduce restlessness or fatigue. And then step 2 is, depending on your individual situation, if you have a challenge with gut health, the way that the stress is shown through diarrhea or constipation or gut health issues, then it's most likely, unless it's a clinical gut health issue, it's most likely useful to increase the amount of fiber and fermented foods, right? The yogurt and the large variety of vegetables. If your system is rather having musculoskeletal issues, meaning lower back pain and neck issues, well, then we go through building stability and flexibility in those areas at the same time. Mornings, you do a little strengthening exercise. Evening, you do a little stretching exercise for that area. So it really then in the step 2 depends on which organ system is expressing stress the most, and that organ system we give a little extra support. And then the third area is once you are now out of the acute issues of what was driving restlessness and fatigue, which can also be mental topics, of course, or working on thought patterns and belief systems. But then we basically go into supporting with building small, subtle, healthy habits around exercise, around the way you process certain thoughts, the way your belief systems are structured, etc. But we believe these bigger changes only work once your body is in a neurobiological state that is not restlessness or fatigue, but it's rather in the healthy middle. And only then we work on coaching interventions.
Interesting. So you really do take care of the body pieces first, and then do some of the coaching, especially once they're able to change some of these physical, habits or physical ways in which they're dealing with stress. Then they move into some of the more coaching, the way you think about things, how you're perceiving things, how you're reframing situations, that kind of thing.
Yeah, which many people might argue that might be the root cause, right? The worry and the perfectionism might be the root cause of my stress. Yet there's what I call a neurobiological paradoxon, which is the more your body is in that restlessness mode, the more worry and perfectionism shows up. And now I'm in that paradoxon. And because when I'm in a period of that restlessness and I'm hyperactive, having a hyperactive period, then usually we first want to address it neurobiologically, because sometimes it's too complex in those situations to work on the belief systems. There's no space for it at the moment. And a neurobiological intervention would for restlessness would be first the circadian rhythm exercise that I just mentioned. And secondly, in some situations that is, however, personal, it might also be helpful to take plant compounds which are reducing restlessness. Rhodiola, rosea, ashwagandha, very well studied. You should talk to your doctor if you just do it blindly. But these are compounds that might temporarily help to take the restlessness out of the system, and which then opens a window of change, of plasticity that we can work in on the belief systems or the maybe nutritional issues that have led to the stress that we see in a person's body.
Yeah, very powerful. Yeah. That's amazing. Um, Martin, what else can you add to the person who's listening right now who, is sort of the typical, executive, the typical leader who is maybe realizing, you know what, this would be something for me it would be helpful for me to be paying attention to this, because there's some things going on in my life that I need to fix, or things that are going on that are not working, or, I've gotten a diagnosis or whatever. Yeah, from kind of a leadership perspective, what would you how yeah, what would you say?
I mean, you never stop learning other things and about yourself, as I mentioned, I think on the first episode. And I feel like if you can get more information and more insight on what drives you, right? And we have described also before, stress is not good or bad. It feels like, okay, there's energy, and sometimes the energy is pushing you forward. Sometimes you feel like it's maybe pushing you more back, or holding you back. I think the more you can go beyond what is like maybe surface knowledge about, this is the situation, this is that, and I can use this tool to fix that situation and the other. It's very much important to understand actually how you work on yourself. Let's say how you are working, because somehow it's the body and the mind and the different systems coming together. But I feel like sometimes you suppress this idea just by saying, this is just a conversation, or this is just a moment where something doesn't seem to flow. And I feel like, especially as a leader, and if you have, lots of responsibility, either, on full business units, on bigger teams, or even on smaller teams, but suddenly these let's call them again stressors, positive or negative, they just come up, and suddenly you have to handle them. Suddenly you have to work on them. Sometimes you have support, sometimes you don't have support, but they affect you, and you take them home, and in the morning you wake up with them. And I think with with an additional level of understanding and someone helping you through this, a tactic like this morning routine or the evening routine will help you a lot to sort of handle yourself better, confront yourself again better, maybe with the situation if it's not resolved, and be able to become more resilient to, because these things will not stop at work.
Yeah, it's not going to go away.
One situation resolved, the next one is in line,
Yeah, our lives are not going to get less stressful.
and actually these are things that also work outside work, because again, you're a unit, you're one human being, and you're fully connected. And it can be, even that situation at home, with your partner, your kids. Again, these are all also affecting you. And I think getting a more holistic understanding of yourself as a leader specifically is super helpful.
Yeah, we're really, this is a podcast about leadership, but it really is about the whole person, and really becoming, and again, I just go back to that tagline, excellence without exhaustion, right? We want to be excellent in our jobs, but we also want to be great people showing up for our families and for our friends and for our communities. And, I think what we're talking about here allows us to be that person, to be able to do those things in a way that, I think the pace and the stress and everything that's going on in the world right now is really pulls us away from that. It really is this is, um, it's not, those things aren't going to change. And yet we have to deal with them. So how can we deal with it in a way that, makes our life sustainable and makes it full of joy, and again, still makes us feel like we're able to accomplish and do great work. I mean, we want it all. And it sounds like, this is I think that what you guys have described and what you're experiencing and the experience that you're bringing to people who are listening right now, there's just a lot of hope and there's a lot of potential for us to understand our bodies and our brains and how we work better so that we can just be better people.
Yeah, and I would maybe say, from my experience in learning now, I mean, work with your body, right? Your body is able to perform. But sometimes we suppress maybe the possibilities just by thinking, now I feel sick, I take the meds, and I feel good again. So I continue, full speed. So read the signals, work with the signals, and then you can have a sustained performance that you enjoy. And obviously the joy returns at the end at work, the good performance, maybe, the people around you perceive you differently as a leader. I mean, a stressed leader, how nice is that,
That's right. So, Jan-Philipp, can you send us out as we wrap up this episode? What would you like to add?
Yeah, maybe to make the case for why do we speak about gut health when when we actually speak about leadership, right? Um, our business case of supporting people in intense jobs with reducing chronic stress goes through productivity. So we calculate very clearly, you measure before, and what we didn't speak about, you of course do the follow-up measurement after you did your habits. And then after 6 months, we see change. And the business case, we calculated very simply, which is for every 10% of stress reduction, we see an X increase in productivity. And how is that? Where does that come from, right? The first step is chronic stress is anti-correlated with all the things you want to have as a leader. It's anti-correlated with empathy. It's anti-correlated with creativity. And it's anti-correlated with complex decision making. It's not anti-correlated with speed of thinking or attention, but these things usually you need when you're a little bit more junior. So once you become a leader, you want to actually operate with a much more downregulated nervous system in order to increase empathy, decision making, and creativity, the very reasons why you're in your job.
That is so powerful. Yeah, I mean, like when you become a senior leader, those are the three things that you need to do. And you may not be doing those things because of the stress that you're not dealing with.
Right, right. I had one executive client leading around 5,000 people in a European organization say, um, when my chronic stress is reduced, 80% of my leadership challenges are solved. So that's really how we look at it. We don't really, we basically trust that our clients already have every skill that they need in order to perform at their job, yet chronic stress gets in the way. And interestingly, there's great studies, for example, correlating the specific things we talked about, like the diversity of your gut microbes are correlated with the ability to take complex decisions. Or the amount of systemic inflammation that is in my immune system is correlated with the level of empathy I can show towards my colleagues. So there is a direct link between the body system that we spoke about today and the impact you have as a leader. And that's why we find the body shouldn't be deflated in the work context.
And do you and is that and some of that can we find some of that on the Sapiens website?
We have written about a few things, and not all of what I had just mentioned. There's oftentimes content of the workshops that we do in a very experiential way.
Okay, got it. Good. Um, so powerful. I know we have to wrap up, but there's just a lot of gold here that I think everyone who's listening right now could really benefit from. And in fact, we're going to have an offering to work with Sapiens, which I'll describe in a little bit. But thank you so much, you guys, for being on the show. I'm so excited that you were here and to just bring some really enlightenment to kind of what's happening in our lives and really hope for what we can do about it. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Winnie, for having us.
Thank you, Vinny.
So wasn't that a great conversation? What I loved about this conversation with Martin and Jan-Philipp is how it brought the science and the story together. Martin's openness about his experience paired with Jan-Philipp's insights showed how powerful it can be when leaders start paying attention not just to what they do, but to how their bodies and minds are responding along the way. This whole series, Excellence Without Exhaustion, has been about rethinking what sustainable leadership really looks like, learning that resilience isn't built by pushing harder, but by understanding ourselves better. Because when we learn to manage stress, we don't just protect our health, we expand our capacity to lead with clarity, energy, and empathy. And don't forget, as a listener of Transformative Leadership Conversations, you can receive 20% off the Sapiens Stress and Resilience Diagnostic and Habit Change program, plus a free 15-minute consultation to learn more. Just use the code TLC or visit www.b-sapiens.com for details. You can also find more details on Sapiens and this offer in the show notes. There's just one more episode in this series, and you'll be hearing from me and my own perspective on stress and resiliency. If you're ready to take your leadership to the next level or empower your teams for success, I'm here to help. Reach out to me directly at winnie@winifred.org or check out my website at www.winniedasilva.com to learn more about my work in coaching executives, developing critical leadership skills, and working with clients to build effective teams. You can also find me on Substack, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I'd love to hear your reflections or suggestions for future topics. Because you are always welcome to take a seat at the table where every conversation has the potential for transformative change.